I sent out a survey, just 5 or 6 questions. And my goal was to understand where the women who responded were, what were they navigating, and what is actually that they needed. One common thread that I see is that you are not missing a skill. What you're missing is a name for what you've already built that doesn't have a name. What I call rooted authority is what you deal with. It's built on 4 roots that first-gen Latinas developed by necessity, under pressure, without anyone telling them that what they were doing was extraordinary. And when you decide to lead from that place, regulated, certain, and whole, you change your trajectory.
Sabrosura pa' ti que qué.
Hola, hola. Welcome back to Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that celebrates the power of our stories, the medicine in our voices, and the magic of reclaiming who we are. Welcome to Q2. We are in quarter 2, first episode of April, first solo episode of April. I guess it's just you and me, so I have been thinking about something since I launched the waitlist for my upcoming leadership cohort. I sent out a survey, just 5 or 6 questions. And my goal was to understand where the women who responded were, what were they navigating, and what is actually that they needed. And first of all, people were responding, which is amazing. They're still responding, actually. I'm still getting their surveys, which is pretty awesome. And that tells me already that people do need something like this. And also, I was kind of taken aback because their responses were so specific, so real. Somebody wrote about wanting to become, and I'm reading direct quotes. Quote, "The lady that doesn't need to speak to command attention. Her energy alone speaks volumes." End quote. Those words are so powerful. And so many of the people that have responded have said they've been, and it's a mix because it's a mixed response because some of you that have responded have been in the industry for over 20 years. They know that people see their expertise, and she still walks in rooms feeling like she doesn't belong. And something that I'm realizing is that these are not women who lack leadership experience. These are women who have been leading for years, some of them for decades. Some of you are starting out, which I'm also getting the surveys. But one common thread that I see is that you are not missing a skill. What you're missing is a name for what you've already built that doesn't have a name. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to name it. What I call rooted authority is what you deal with. It's built on 4 roots that first-gen Latinas developed by necessity, under pressure, without anyone telling them that what they were doing was extraordinary. The translating, the managing without authority, the caring everything for everyone, and surviving visibility. In this episodio, we're going to name each one of the roots. We're going to ground them in research because, I'm a nerd and I always have to back up my thoughts. And I'm going to show you exactly why what you've built quietly, without a blueprint, without recognition, is actually the foundation that rooted authority grows from. Entonces, if you've ever walked into a room you earned the right to be in and still feel like someone was going to find you out, este episodio es para ti. When I was building this episode and I was brainstorming and kind of like figuring out, I always speak in metaphors and I build frameworks around teachings because I think it's a really easy way to learn. And this time what came to me was a braid. I want you to think about braiding. And this is the specific kind where someone's hands know exactly what to do without thinking. And I learned how to braid with Barbie dolls. And I'm an eldest daughter. And actually, who taught me how to braid was my next door neighbor who had 3 boys. And she wanted a girl all her life. And so when we moved into each other, like I was probably, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 perhaps. when we moved into that place and they were next to us and she found out that I was a girl, she was like, "Oh my gosh, the girl I've been waiting for." And it was very cute and parents became really good friends. And so she taught me how to braid and she would do her own braids. And when I think about when I ask you to think about that person who literally knows where to put their hands and grab the strands and all the things, I think of her. Her name is Amparo. And so I think of her because she would literally grab her hair and start French braiding her whole head without seeing any, without seeing, without thinking. It was just, she knew. Braiding requires four things: strand one, strand two, strand three, and strand four. I know the majority of times we have a 3-strand braid, but in this case, we have a 4-strand braid. And the knowledge of how to hold all of them at once without dropping any. So think about braiding and how you use all of your fingers, you use every one of your resources to hold each one of the strands. And separately, each strand, it's still its own strand. And the thing is that woven together, that's what becomes something that holds under pressure. So I want to talk to you today about the 4 strands you've been holding your entire career. These are the 4 things you learned to do because they became a necessity. This is what the situation required. You were not trained for them. These 4 things for roots became because you were the first, because you're Latina, because you were the one in the room who knew how to make things work, and because you're just resourceful AF. And the thing is that most leadership development talks about what you need to build. Pero el día de hoy, today, I'm going to talk to you about what you've already built. Because what I know after a decade of coaching first-gen Latina leaders, you did not arrive unprepared. You arrived with roots most leaders never develop, or actually you have to pay somebody to help them develop. We're going to name them, and once you name them, mi reina, everything changes. So, root number 1, translating. You've been translating your whole life. And I don't mean language only. I don't mean Spanish to English, though, of course, that's a thing. But I mean translating your family's world into the boardroom, translating pain into professionalism, translating we don't do it that way into actually let's figure out a way that the C-suite will accept this, or that executives will accept this, or that whoever is at the top will accept it. When I think about translating as a root, I think about so many instances in my career when I had to translate. I'm going to give you 2 examples. One was when I was sitting in a marketing meeting, and in fact, we were working on a Latino campaign. The brief came and we got to see some modeling of potential assets that were going to be developed for this brand. And this is a pretty big brand. And in this case, because it was a Latino specific campaign, I had to be like, wait a minute. Why are all of these quote Latinos in your graphics that you're showing us and what this campaign is going to look like? All of them look white. This shows me zero diversity. I don't like, you have nobody with curly hair. You have zero Afro-Latinidad represented. There's like 1 shade of brown, if we could even call it that. You're gonna disconnect. There's a big like disconnect here, unless you want to clarify to me that who you are looking to attract is white Latinos. And everyone was like, oh, we didn't realize that. And so that's a translation that, and frankly, I would say a reason why we need to be in those rooms where decisions are made. That's one example. Another example is even earlier, super early in my career, my first US job in the US, actually, I was a debt collector. I was a car debt collector. And I don't know if this is still true, but it's kind of like a huge call center. And it's like you churn calls pretty quickly. literally, the system makes the phone call, you have a headset, and you just click a button and it's ringing. And then you finish the call, you click a button, and it's the next call is ringing. So they literally have you just making phone call after phone call. And I remember, of course, I was put in the Spanish team, and my supervisor came to me one time, and this is the Midwest, by the way. So this is not, for those of you in the coast where todo el mundo habla español, like, it's very different in the Midwest. And so my supervisor, who was a white man who had, um, what is it that they do? Volunteered, or ¿cómo se dice? They go on missions. He did a mission in, I don't know, somewhere in Latin America, like Peru, I think, and he spoke Spanish. He came to me and he was like, I noticed that you spend much longer on your calls, like the Spanish team does. And I was like, well, yeah, because we operate different. For us, like, you get a book as a debt collector. Again, I don't know if this is how it works now, but then you would get like your book of hundreds of people, but eventually, I mean, you call them every day, literally. And so you get to know people. And, you know, there were times when you were like, Juan, ¿qué pasó? Todavía no me has mandado el pago. A ver, cuéntame, what's going on in your life, And so this conversation was around, why are you guys taking so much longer than the English team? I mean, there are metrics and we need to like meet the metrics. And I was like, well, you have to change your metrics because the way that we build relationships, and not that you need to build a relationship as you're collecting debt, but kind of, because there is a point I realized that the more rapport you build with the people that are not paying, the more embarrassed they are of not paying and therefore they pay, which I don't know if that's a way that would happen in English, but that's a way that I figured in Spanish. And so I was like, you need to let me talk to the people and find out how their kids are doing and do all the things because that's just how we operate. And guess what? Yeah, I might be taking longer in my calls, but I'm also getting paid more. Like, we're receiving more payments. So that's another translation that I got to do. And I have so many other stories, but those two examples are moments when it wasn't until later in life. It wasn't, frankly, probably until I was coaching clients that were in similar situations that I was like, you know what? That was kind of extraordinary. That was a skill that cannot be taught unless you've lived it. There's no way somebody else would have known how to do that unless you have the lived experience to back up your statement. And research on code switching shows that this kind of linguistic and cultural fluency, the ability to move between registers, between power dynamics, between worlds, actually requires a sophisticated cognitive and emotional processing. Most executive coaches spend years trying to develop this in leaders who grew up in a single cultural context. And the thing is, mi reinita, is that you have it already. You built it by necessity. I call this a superpower. We are going to call this root multicultural intelligence, the both and. When you were translating to survive, it cost you. When you translate from choice, when you decide when to bridge and when to hold your ground, it becomes one of the most powerful, so powerful leadership skills in any room. And I have applied it. And it's so fun because once you come from rooted authority, let's go. Root number 2, managing without authority. How many of you have been managing people who don't report to you? Raise your hand. I mean, I'm sure everyone listening is going to raise your hand. From coordinating outcomes nobody asks you to coordinate, to holding accountability in situations where you had zero official authority to do so, pero nadie más lo hacía, so you were like, let's just get this done. Another survey response that I got was, quote, this is the response: expectations because they know my work ethic, but not the title or compensation for what I deliver, end quote. Oh, I felt that, I heard that, I see that so much. I want to actually name what that means because research shows that influence-based leadership, this is the ability to move people without positional power, is considered one of the hardest leadership competencies to develop. Organizations pay consultants significant amounts of money to teach this to leaders who've never had to do it. And the thing is, you've been doing it for years, probably, without anyone calling it that, without anyone recognizing you for it, but you've been doing it. And the root, what we're going to call this, is influence-based leadership. The both and, managing without authority in a system that exploited that capacity was survival. Managing without authority as a chosen leadership practice. Knowing when to exercise it, when to demand the title that matches the work, is when you get into your power. With this root, I often think about the school ladies, the ladies at the front desk in schools, how they're like running the show, and that's actually who you respond to most of the time. And they don't have a title that gives them that level of authority, yet they're still they have influence-based leadership because everyone responds to them. Everyone is in a way low-key kind of afraid of them because they're going to report you, to the principal. Those types of positions have a lot of influence-based leadership. And if we think about it, many times that's where we start our careers. We often, when I hear stories of Latinas, they're like, oh, I started as a secretary, or I started as a receptionist. Well, that's how you build this root, your influence-based leadership, because you realize that the work has to be done and somebody has to do it. So when you move it into rooted authority with it, then you can move worlds, truly. Hay conversaciones que nos enseñaron a callar, y dinero was one of them. Pero here's the truth. Tu dignidad financiera no debería depender de que traduzcas todo para tu mamá, tus tías, tu abuelita o quien sea. Savvy Ladies just made it easier than ever to get financial help en español. Their free helpline means your mama can ask a question without you having to translate shame, confusion, or whatever her comadre told her. Talleres, clases, consejos, todo completamente gratis y con el respeto que nuestras familias merecen. Porque libertad financiera no es lujo, es necesidad. So whether it's you or your mama who's ready to take that first step, go to savvyladies.org. That is SAVVYLADIES.org. Empieza hoy. La dignidad financiera no se pide, se reclama. Here's the thing. Latina families have been saving money forever. From reusing plastic containers for comida, folding up plastic bags under the sink, and diluting dish soap with water. The last thing we need is to pay fees to access our money, right? Pues, in case you didn't know, BMO customers have access to 40,000 fee-free ATMs across the United States. Plus, their BMO Smart Advantage checking account has no monthly maintenance fee. Learn more about how BMO can help by visiting bmo.com/checking. bmo.com/checking. Conditions apply. Accounts provided in the United States by BMO Bank, N.A. member FDIC. Root number 3 is caring. And this is the one that everyone comes to, the one that holds the tension in the room before anyone else feels it, the one who makes sure everyone's okay even when she's not. And I know some of you are raising your hands for this one. Studies on emotional labor show that women leaders are expected to perform significantly more of the work than their male counterparts. And that this labor is directly connected to team trust, psychological safety, and organizational performance. In other words, what do you do when you carry a room? Actually, we can measure that. That is ROI. The thing is that it never shows in your performance review, but it needs to be recognized. This root, we call it the psychological safety creation, the both and. Caring without acknowledgement, without reciprocity, without the ability to put it down, depletes you. Caring it as a conscious boundary leadership practice, knowing what's yours and what belongs to somebody else, it's one of the most sophisticated things a leader can do, and you know how to do it. You already know how to do it. We're simply naming it. So think about it. When you walk into the room, are you expected to carry it all? When do you draw the line and say, no, ma'am, this is not mine to carry any longer. You want to carry the root of psychological safety creation so that you have clarity around what's yours and let people carry what they need to carry that's not yours, because we can only control what we can control. Root number 4, surviving visibility. The one I don't see people talk about, the specific experience of being seen in a room that wasn't built for you. And this is where I'm going to reference the presumed incompetent books and studies that I've talked about actually in the Bad Bunny episode with Professor Vanessa and Petra, Professor Petra. It's 2 volumes called Presumed Incompetent. And they're edited by Latina scholars Gabriela Gutierrez Imus, Yolanda Flores Niemann, Carmen Gonzalez, and Angela Harris. It documents in detail what women of color navigate in professional spaces. The presumption that you don't belong, that your competence is always in question, and that you have to prove yourself in ways your counterparts simply do not. This has been proven now. If you felt it, it's real. Now, we're not going to get into the lull of it like, oh, we grab and we utilize data as knowledge so that we can then use it as a stepping stool. Okay? So we have that research that que comprueba que the moment a Latina walks in a room, or a woman of color for that, you're expected incompetent. The anticipation is she doesn't know enough. And then there's research from Tolshian and Burry. They wrote a piece called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. Their argument is that what women of color feel in these spaces is not internal self-doubt. It's actually a rational, accurate response to a real external environment. So, you were not imagining the extra scrutiny. It was real. It is real. Your nervous system simply is doing a correct read of the room. When I read this, I was like, oh, so I'm not crazy. I'm not just like making things up in my head. This is actually real. So, you have survived. You keep showing up. You have white knuckled it. You're all your way through. And you have led anyway. And it's not a small thing. And I think about all the stories, all of the interviews I've done with first gens, with Latinas, with women of color who've shared all of those moments and instances when they're like, it felt like, I wasn't quite being seen based on my capacity. And I pushed through anyway. And now we have evidence that this is true. And also, that the fact that you continue to show up is also evidence of that extraordinary capacity under conditions you have had to carry that most leaders never had to face. And when I say most leaders, I'm talking about the dominant culture of people who have just arrived because the world has been made for them. This route, we call it the high stakes presence under pressure. The both and is the survival was the right response when thriving wasn't yet available. When you name it consciously, this route becomes regulated visibility. This is your ability to be seen, to stay grounded, and to lead from a place of connectedness, wholeness, certainty. And that is the whole foundation of rooted authority, is you want to lead from your certainty. Because the thing is that at the end of the day, those are the 4 roots. And the power is not in one only. It's all woven together. So this is why when I think about the roots, I think about them being woven into a braid. Because when each one of them stands alone, when each strand stands alone, it's shadow work. So translating alone can become people-pleasing, constant shape-shifting, and losing yourself in the process. Managing without authority alone can become invisible martyrdom. Martyrdom. ¿Cómo se dice? Martyrdom. It could also mean that you carry responsibility without recognition or reward and without expecting it, which I know we're taught to be humble and we also need to be recognized. Caring alone becomes burnout, depletion, and resentment. Surviving visibility alone becomes chronic hypervigilance, always braced for threat. Always braced for threat is something that I often, every week, I work with my clients on because it's this pattern that we develop that says, are you sure you deserve peace? Where's the next dramatic moment? Just stay on, wait, brace for it. And so that's tricky. The thing is that as we wove all of the roots together, we've named them, we've chosen, and we've practiced them with intention. The 4 roots become something no leadership program can manufacture. They become rooted authority, and that rooted authority is within you. Because this is not confidence performed. This is not a power post that you would do, or even is not a negotiation tactic. It's what happens when a first-gen Latina who's been translating, managing, caring, and surviving finally understands the things that she's been carrying and repositions them as power, as her own superpower, and understands that they were her training. They're not weakness. It's your training. And when you decide to lead from that place, regulated, certain, and whole, you change your trajectory. When you walk into the room changes. Research on mirror neurons tells us this. A regulated leader literally rewires the nervous system of the people around her. Your rooted authority doesn't just benefit you, it changes what is possible for everyone in the room. And so for all of you that always say, I just want to leave the world a better place. If you listen to this, for a long time, my intros talked about people that make the world a better place. If you consider yourself someone who makes the world a better place, or wants to make the world a better place, or wants to leave the world better than you found it, then you want to understand that you are a leader and you want to bring in your rooted authority. Because as you change, the room changes, the world changes, communities become better. And I'm sure you're thinking about probably someone whom you have dealt with, perhaps as a mentor or an elder, or someone who, you just think about them when you wonder, who is it that when they walk in the room just feels calmer? The room just feels better. That's rooted authority. You've experienced it, and perhaps you have stepped into it already. So my question for you is, which one of these 4 roots have you been treating as a burden when it might actually be the most developed part of your leadership? Think about that. So, over the next few weeks, we're going to go deeper into each piece of this. We're going to talk about the visibility wound, why capable women stall right at the edge of being seen. I've done that many times. Listen, all this work, I'm my first client. We're going to talk about the imposter ceiling, why it gets harder, not easier, the higher you go, and what the research actually says about that. We're going to talk about what presence over performance actually looks and feels like in your body, because we know you're here because we do somatic work. We start with the body. Pero la invitación del día de hoy, what I want you to take with you today is one practice. Watch out for those roots and perhaps write them down. Which one of the 4 do you have the most evidence for? Where's the proof in your life that you have built this? Write it like a credential. Write it like how proud you are of your certificates on your wall. Write that root as a credential, because it's a credential. Something like, I have 15 years of experience translating between the world I came from and the rooms I lead in. That's multicultural intelligence. That's my root. You see? So it's like so empowering once you see it from that lens. That's your invitation. That's what I invite you to do this week, is as you navigate, whenever you listen to this, as you continue to navigate in your world, tune in to bring that awareness to say, ooh, you know what? That is a translation, or that is me showing up visible. And how long have I been doing that? What helped me develop that? And just like how I reflected, and I give you 2 examples of translating when I was 19 years old all the way to translating when I was in an executive room, you'll be able to trace back how those roots have been developed over time and how awesome they are for you and how they've allowed you to get to where you are in really, really, really cool ways. Y bueno, if you've been sitting on the wait list for the Caída Culture Leadership Cohort, head over to cafeconpam.com/leadership. And of course, this is something that I have created with so much love. The 4 roots are the foundation of everything we do together in the container. The 4 roots: rooted authority, what it means to lead from wholeness rather than survival. It's the work that we're going to do in there. And I want to close with letting you know that you were already a leader. You are a leader. You have been for a long time. And the only thing that's changing is that now you know what to call it. It's that simple. Bueno, let's close with a quick little recap. We started talking about the braid, 4 strands: translating, managing without authority, caring, surviving visibility. Each one alone has cost you something. And we want to honor that because the cost is real. The exhaustion was real. The invisibility is real. Because what we don't want is to spiritually bypass any of that. All of the truth is the truth. And what is also true is that you didn't come to this moment empty-handed. You came with 4 of the most sophisticated leadership competencies that exist, in my opinion. And you got to build this without a curriculum. You got to build this without a coach. You got to build this because the situation required you to build it, and you showed up for it. Y no es por nada, eso es todo. So this week, we're going to create awareness, write it down, name the roots, give them the language they deserve. This is not I'm not going to give you a journal prompt. Because I want you to approach it from a professional foundation, kind of like credential, remember? We write it as a credential. And of course, if this episode is something that resonated with you, please share it, send it to your leader to a leader in your life or your colleague at work or whoever it is, maybe your team who's been leading for years. And I also tend to work with a lot of the executives of the CEOs that I work with because they're like, I see all of her potential and why does she not see it? And so perhaps that person might need the roots to be named. Because I know you know that person who keeps waiting to feel ready. You know that person who is without question already ready. Maybe she just needs to hand out this little episode that she can create some awareness and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Of course, tag me on the socials. Tell me which root hit the hardest for you or the softest, which one you're like, oh, we're good on that one. I'm very curious if you've been calling a burden one of the roots, could they actually be your strongest strand? Of course, remember, head over to cafeconpam.com/leadership. I'm actually going to add the survey there. If you feel called to fill it out, please do. It truly takes 2-3 minutes and it makes my day, truly, when you do that. And inside of this cohort, we're going to go deep on it together. We're going to explore your roots, your rooted authority. We're going to do this as a group with other people who are building the same thing. And with the understanding that we deserve to build it with ease and we honor where we come from and what we've built from it. Y bueno, eso es todo por hoy. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for choosing to grow with me, for trusting me with your leadership, with your roots, with your becoming. I truly do not take that for granted. Nos vemos la próxima semana. We're going to go deeper. Y bueno, como siempre, sigue brillando. Café con Pam is created con mucho amor by our small but mighty team. Content production by Nancy Jaimes. Podcast management by Maru Linardi. Social media and marketing by Brenda Figueroa. And me, your host, Pam Covarrubias. To keep the cafecito brewing and the healing flowing, join the Supporters Club for only $5 a month and access early episodes, behind-the-scenes vibes, and exclusive minisodes you won't hear anywhere else. Screenshot this episode and tag me and share what resonated. I love seeing your takeaways. Follow on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's keep the conversation going with us on social media at Café con Pan Podcast because your voice always matters there. We love being on Instagram and Facebook. Gracias for listening to Café con Pan, a Spread Ideas Move People production. For more episodes, guest info, or resources, visit cafeconpam.com. And if you're healing from calladita culture and don't know where to start, you can take the quiz. cafeconpam.com/quiz for Tia Wisdom and cariño just for you.
Sabrosura pa' ti que